I am Maria, and this is my portal.
Hi guys, we will be speaking to Maria today about her practice, about spirituality, and seeing where it takes us. So hi Maria.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. So
Yeah.
why don't we begin by defining your art in like one sentence?
I will say I approach my art practice as a way of channeling, as a way to bring ideas into substance. So really connecting other worlds to this world. Yeah.
Perfect. So how does spirit then influence your artistic practice?
How does spirit, you said?
Yeah. So in terms of like the studio or like the art side of things, how do you bridge that connection?
Well, I actually do have a spiritual practice that's very integrated in my routine, in my health, in my my mornings, my evenings, and it takes both physical form, like in the practice, just like the caring of my body and the caring of my mind through meditation and physical practices, and in terms of the studio and the art creation, there is always altars, so spaces that are they are intentionally created to anchor certain energies or presences that are called to the space of the studio or the space of the home, and they open and close in cycles depending on what I'm exploring, researching, or working on. And and there's water in them, there's fire in them, images, rocks, plants, and that they are always in the studio and they're near the paintings and the books, so it's kind of all entangled, like it's just all merged with daily action.
I can see that. It's so interesting. Do you have like a very one element that you resonate with like the most usually, or you find yourself like the most drawn to?
Yes, and it changes. At the moment, I am most drawn to water. Yeah, because it's been a very emotional year. Like my emotional body was, up until a few weeks ago, was like so kind of fragmented and full, and I've been using I've been going to the hammam, like hot pools, and the sauna and thermal waters in nature, like almost every week or like every couple of weeks for months now, and really speaking to the water and also praying to the water in the full moons to move things. And
I completely understand. I think it's interesting to also ask you if you're into astrology per se, and what your big three are in terms of like your sun, moon, rising.
I am into astrology. I don't have deep knowledge of this wisdom. Like I could not read a chart, and I could not look at a chart and tell you what's going on this month. but I do listen to. There's two astrologers I follow and listen to, and I have friends that kind of assist that part of my life. And I am Scorpio with Virgo. Ascending is Virgo, and and I actually have a lot in Scorpio.
I was gonna say, because Scorpio is very much like about like life, death, rebirth, and I find this very interesting. It carries through a lot of your work, I think. Would I be right to say there's a lot to do with the womb going on here?
Yeah, there is actually, like, you just hit the most powerful and at the same time the most tender spot of my identity, or the exploration of my identity at the moment, or what I'm connecting to, because I've just very recently come into the realization that my life is a constant cycle of death and rebirth, and it's actually in the kind of axial center of my path as a human, as a woman, is there are sometimes longer, sometimes shorter cycles of very, very sharp deaths and rebirths of identity and work, and it's very much connected to the feminine and feminine energy and the warmth. So it's like everything you said is like, yeah.
It's it can be so difficult to talk about, but I think in reading through your works, like for example the Blood series Push that you did, it makes me think a lot about motherhood and I guess what draws us and what repels us to being a mother and why in some way. So I'll get you to talk a little bit about that. I think what I might have noticed is I see this like three-headed, like a creature coming from the woman, and the baby is facing the mother but away from them. Is the older man like an Eastern Mongolian man or something? Just so
yeah. Well, it's very I kind of knew you were going to mention this work. So funny. So I did this work after, and probably you read about it, I did this work after I had an abortion, and that was about 6 years ago. And I've had, come if you want, I've had altogether, I've had 3 abortions throughout my life. 2 of them were chosen, and 1 was kind of just happened. And it's very funny because they happened exactly 6 years apart. Right. So this artwork I did after my second abortion. I was about 27 years old or something. And the figure you mentioned, like that Asian man, was not meant to be like a Mongolian figure, and I actually didn't have a specific connection to the East that was so materialized yet. I went to Mongolia afterwards, and I went to the East afterwards. To me, it was sort of a symbol of time, age, wisdom, masculinity, and like the figure of the teacher from that kind of masculine energy side. And then there is I don't know if you read, but I'm actually like 4 times in that painting. Like there is like I drew a version of me that was a child, and that's like a paint. It's a drawing inside the drawing hanging on the wall. And then I'm also the woman that's kind of birthing this crazy thing. And then I'm also one of the heads coming out of my own self. So yeah, and like these drawings, I don't really think about them so rationally. Like the images come and then I look at them and I'm like, that's kind of funny. I'm 4 times or like 3 times in this painting. Like, what does it all mean? It's like, yeah.
It's I feel like it's so interesting for us to read them, like these portraits of you, and see where they take us, because it is something so personal to you being laid bare to us. And I think what's interesting, if you don't mind me asking, the man on the other side of the painting, was he like a Western medicine practitioner or just like a GP or a doctor of some kind?
You mean there is like a man in a suit?
And he's like, yeah.
Somehow back then, because I did this work about like 6-7 years ago, back then I used figures of men sometimes to kind of represent what for me was an oppressive system or a system of the patriarchy, and like this very masculine but like tight, solid, not balanced masculine systemic solid view of reality. And he's actually freaking out, like he cannot take it, he cannot take what's going on. And in the other, there is another drawing of a man in a blood scene, totally freaking out, and it came from this feeling of, as a woman and as a complex human being, I have all these energies and urges and impulses, and I feel like, to be honest, most men cannot really handle it, like or like hold and like where do I put myself? Is there actually a container where I can exist without censoring myself by a system or by the mirror of a person? And in medicine, and like all the medical experience of the abortion was horrible. Like there was no emotional understanding, no spirit, no intuition, and not even through friends I could find real I don't know, like holding of the especially like the spiritual emotional aspect of the experience.
That sounds incredibly lonely for you. Very.
It was strange because I feel like I just kept kind of within my own sphere a lot of the experiences, and then through time it was recycled and composted, and it turned into breakthroughs and just learning lots of stuff. So like I don't, like I hold no resentment to anything or anyone, but I definitely had to go through it on my own. That's the truth.
No, I understand. Like that is so difficult. And I think what's interesting is like I experienced like the man there. To me, the first way I read it was, he looked as though he might be administering this procedure for her. And then we look back to like the Hippocratic Oath, which is like 460 to 380 BC, where he wrote like, I will not give a woman any abortive remedy. So like way back then it was written in like, no, like it's not going to happen. Like conventionally it will not happen. And then you look at like something as like Tibetan Buddhism, where they don't like necessarily the fact that women have to have it, but they don't condemn them for it. So I feel it's interesting how there was this dialogue between like the man who appeared to be quite spiritual in some way, and potentially I perceived to be from that part of the world, and in kind of that confrontation with the man that condemns it, if you know what I mean. And how
that's so interesting.
I saw this for me, I just saw this conflict, like this unspoken conflict between this kind of spiritual man as like, allow her to reclaim her womb, like allow her to make this decision, and then this man going like, no, this is wrong type of thing. And I think that's just how I was reading it, but I think it's really interesting to see how you have experienced it.
Wow. Thank you for doing that research and connecting those dots. I had never got to that information, and it's quite fascinating. I think sometimes we have within us information about the world and existence that's not so obvious, and it comes through symbols. So I like your reading. I take it. I take your reading of it. I definitely feel like there is a wider understanding of reality coming from Eastern cultures in terms of spirit than there is right now in, for example, Europe, and like the European perspective, which is so like mentally focused, and like there's all these like rational boxes. And I like don't fit in those boxes. The boxes are horrible to me. That's why I turn to more Eastern attempts to find understanding. And therefore ended up as a symbol of wisdom in that drawing.
Right. And there really is so much wisdom to be had here. And I think it's interesting to me. I noticed that you mentioned like traveling through these different places. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about what these places brought to you, or what your travels gave you.
Wow. Traveling, I mean, now with like the perspective of the years, what I realize is that there is the word in Spanish is peregrinación. I cannot think of the word in English right now. But when you take like a walk to go towards a sacred space or a holy place, and it's a long journey,
like a pilgrimage, maybe.
Pilgrimage. That's
right.
The word.
Okay, gotcha.
The word. It's. I don't think there's gonna be any face left. I'm
really enjoying this.
Yes. Like I didn't super plan or choose to go to so many different places on Earth, although it's very common in our generation.
Yeah.
Because the world got smaller.
Thank you.
I think it's on.
Hi.
Ah, gracias, Tayari. Thank you for this artwork and your collaboration. Yes, I didn't choose or plan to do them, but just like through different pulses and rhythms, life ended up taking me to, I don't know, it took me to India, it took me to China, to Mongolia, to many other places, but Morocco, like those were perhaps the most like shocking ones, the ones that shook more my reality. And with time and perspective, what I understood is that they were so key in the recognition of memories within myself that were connected to those territories and those cultures, and that were obviously beyond my birth time. And there were activations in my spiritual senses and my understanding of everything, time, and what wisdom is. Like, we have so much wisdom that's coded within ourselves, and it doesn't even come from this lifetime, it doesn't come from this time, you know. It's also collective, and I'm not even referring so much to the idea of birth and rebirth, but just to collective, to the collective mind, the collective history of humanity and beyond humanity, just life, the kingdoms of earth, life, and these places and the spirits that guard different territories and that are so present when you are in really wild nature like Mongolia or India, you know, where nature is so pure. Nature speaks to you very loud, very clearly, and if you're listening, you're just on this receiving side of profound initiations. And that's what these main trips I mentioned were to me. They were huge initiations in so many ways. Like, I almost died in India, I almost died again in Mongolia. Like, literally in Mongolia, I surrendered to dying. I was sure I was gonna die, and I had no way to get in touch with my family at all. Like, I was just peacefully saying goodbye to my body, surrounded by Mongolian people singing beautiful things to me, you know, like, but I lived, and I'm very happy I lived. And but you know, like, it was not just contemplating a mountain and being like, nature is beautiful, I'm so enlightened. It was like really physical initiations, very, yeah.
So how does it feel to be right at the precipice, or right on the edge, I suppose, of going to death or entering into that realm?
Well, that's a great question also, because my mother just passed 2 months ago, and I was very, very close to her for the entire year, like by her side, and literally like walking with her through the portal of death. So not only that was the first time I saw death actually happening, like really happening, and with a soul that's very, it's like you are part of them. Like, literally, the mother is your first body, your first nutrition, your pathway towards this material plane, right? So so I've seen both in my experience how it feels like when you're like, oh my god, like my body may just like stop here, and be okay with it, kind of okay with it, also in a bit of a trance, I have to say, like not in a normal state of consciousness. And there I definitely felt this in Mongolia, for example. I definitely felt this portal that anyone that entered in it just had their heart fully like open,
Expansively.
Like, it's a portal that purifies everything and everyone when you enter it. There's no bullshit, there's no like mental walls or separation. So anyone that came in and didn't have like a purity of being will get upset, will start purging And I felt this in Mongolia. Some people, I was quite sick, and some people that came in could not handle it. They will get angry or sad, and they will just leave. And the ones that were like steady and connected, they could be there with such power and really accompany the process from their heart. And there was so much beauty, like so much beauty. Is probably one of the most beautiful moments of my life, was almost dying in Mongolia. And definitely the most beautiful moment in my life was the death of my mother, and seeing what it did to her, how it softened her, even though it was physically horrible, like from a human perspective. She died of cancer, so it was really hard to see, but it purified her, it purified me and my siblings, my father. The whole family was healing and opening so much. And that's what this portal of death does. And I feel like it's the same as the portal of birth when women give birth. And that's what midwives say, and people that have seen births, that's what they say. And intuitively this feels like a yes to me.
It's very interesting, because as I was listening to you say that, I've come across this thing called the death doula, like as in, you know, when we have a birthing doula. And I don't know too much about them, but I think for me, death has always been the one thing of my spiritual practice that I find so difficult to wrap my head around. I remember I got this massive book, like the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and I read it and I'm like, I want to believe, but for some reason it's still a source of like, oh my God, like what? If you know what I mean? It's very unnerving. But it was interesting how there is now a job, or there is now a how would I say, a vocation where we walk with someone that's dying as we would walk with someone that's being born, like it's a real thing. And is that what you felt as though you were, like a death doula in some way? Or
wow, all your questions are so spot on. I'm so impressed. I ran into this concept throughout the illness of my mother, and I listened to women that do this. They were all women, like through podcasts and research. And I didn't put myself in a position where I identified with that, but I was aware of it, and I tried my very, very, very best to do the best emotional, human, spiritual companionship I could for my mother and for my family. And it was extremely imperfect, but it was perfect at the same time. And I sat with her in meditation for hours without end, and did Reiki and channeling, and talked to her soul and allowed her soul to give me so much information and so much transmission. And sometimes I lost my shit because she's my mother, and sometimes she did things I was like, what the fuck, mom, but like, in general, it really, really like tickled that spot of this is such a sacred position, and I'm kind of hooked in it. And we were working with a team of 2 women that from a medical perspective were actually doing that. They were doing that for my mother, and they were amazing and very connected. So that energy was there.
So was there a moment where you felt you received a sign or an indication to take, your mother's journey into sort of your own hands, if you know what I mean, and guide her through, as opposed to just being with?
Yes. And it was a very, very clear moment, because and it was very short after her diagnosis, because as I said in the beginning of the conversation, like my spiritual practice is an everyday practice. Like literally, I don't have health if I don't have a spiritual practice. Like that's how my body works. I don't have a choice. But so my mother was diagnosed, and she gave us the information of her diagnosis and I was pregnant at the time. And 2 days later, I went to do the first kind of picture of the pregnancy, ecography, and the resolution of that was the pregnancy is not happening. You know, like that pregnancy is not coming to term. And when when you have your mother possibly surely dying, and your own journey into motherhood comes to an end like this, like straight away,
just like
came back, like within the next 3-4 days, I was kind of just visualizing the whole ancestral lineage from my mother's side and everything that's happening to the women. They're all women. There's no men alive in that part of my family. And it was, the information there was so clear that what was happening was all connected. What was happening to me and my own motherhood, or what was happening to my mom and her health and her life, and to my grandma and the sisters of my mother and my own sister, and the world, because the pandemic here in Europe began the week after. So all that information together immediately was like, all right, we're on a journey, and let's open our eyes to what's coming, to what it may mean. Like there's no meaning for now. There's just witnessing and like handling the best we can. And it immediately, my sister and I are very close, and my sister and I immediately began doing ancestral work and gathering the women and talking to my grandma and talking to my mom and kind of sitting in meditation. And so it was very soon, just a few days after the information of the body state.
No, I understand. And I think it's interesting when you speak about the ancestral healing. So was there like one message particularly from your mother that you received that stays with you, or something that she passed to you?
Yes, and that so many things, right? But when the last month that she was still in her body, it was very intense physically. It was very intense energetically. She would spend many hours of the day in like sleep or like deep rest, and some periods also in like a very disturbed states of like pain and stuff. So I will be sitting with her loads in like doing Reiki or just like listening to her heart. And in those moments, especially if there was physical contact, like if my hands were on her body and I was very close to her, there was this like channel connected to a sort of like cosmic library, and a lot of information about precisely the way souls get connect to a body and are magnetized to a body, like incarnation and de-incarnation, incarnation, excarnation. So when I was saying before, the death portal, literally like it is a portal. That's how it's, at least from my vision, that's how it feels. It's this vibrational field. It's so intense, it allows for spirit and matter to join or to separate. So the energy is so, I think if you are open to perceive it, is so intense. And she gave me so much information. I mean, I don't feel like she gave it to me, but she was somehow a facilitator, or like
the source,
kind of the school guardian or something. Like she opened that school for me.
And I think a lot of people refer to that source of knowledge as like the Akashic Library. Are you kind of familiar with that term, or do you resonate in some way?
I am familiar with the term, and the technique of channeling, or the school of channeling that arrived to my life and that I use for myself or to accompany others, doesn't refer to that word specifically, just because of the vocabulary that's used in that school. But yeah, I'm familiar with that, and it's the same. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the Akasha, like that kind of cosmic library, and accessing it and working with it. Yeah.
And this is so interesting to me because I noticed like up behind me in landscapes from the fourth dimension, like there's a lot of geometry. So do you perceive like portals to be geometric in some way or have a relation to maybe sacred geometry?
The way information shows to me has geometry, color, and
Right,
sound as kind of the three main pillars of form. So geometry is a way that it's a way to organize information. It's a way to give shape to realities and codes.
right.
So it like geometry anchors
Mhm.
vibrational fields and information in a way that, like, it's not by chance that temples, homes
Mhm.
have a specific geometry,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
they move energy in a specific way, and in very, very specific physical ways. This is not just energetic. This gets to like very material experiences and how bodies
Right.
react to space. And it's all like, I haven't spent actually any time studying geometry from like
Right.
my left brain, from a
Yeah.
rational, although I would actually love to do that. It's like, it's all intuitive so far. I would love to perhaps
Mhm.
spend some time doing mathematical study of it, but in terms of the paintings and how I use it, it's kind of yeah, like the images, like an intuitive connection.
And I think the interesting thing is you don't necessarily have to have the mathematical knowledge or aptitude to tune into this. Like I think the wisdom comes to us in so many ways, as you experience, it's not always like linear. But I wanted to ask you, because it's called landscapes from the fourth dimension, how do you experience the fourth dimension, or what is the fourth dimension according to you?
mm, I love this question. For Because it's also changed quite deeply in the last year and a half.
Mm,
So up until a year and a half, because now my spiritual senses are way more active and awake, and I can discern
right.
information, so I can give very specific answers to these
Mhm.
questions. Because I have the maps, I have more maps and more vocabulary. But before that, it was a bit more like messy. uh,
Right.
like I've had a meditation practice for a very long time, um, and so before I had the maps to read information, I could sense my attention, my consciousness
Mhm.
inhabiting spaces where there were beings and there were energy fields, and there were possibilities to change the frequency of my own body, of my mental state, of my emotional
Mhm.
state, of being in different places and spaces, even connect to other humans, incarnated humans,
Yeah.
through that space, even though we may not be in the same physical space. And I knew all that, I just didn't know how to make order of it. And when
Mhm.
I began having maps and a proper teaching for channeling techniques, let's say the maps of the fourth dimension became way more simple and
Right.
accessible. And what I refer to as the fourth dimension is, because there are many
Perception.
ways to speak about the fourth or the fifth or the sixth, like all sorts of
Yeah.
dimensions. But let's say the fourth dimension to me is the astral plane, is the
Right.
like the let's say it's like almost like the first plane you access beyond the
Uh-huh.
material plane through your dreaming state or in your awakened consciousness in a state of meditation, in a
Right.
particular kind of brain wave where you can vibrationally travel and affect reality. And yeah.
It's interesting that you, like you say, like there are so many planes, but you hone in on like the fourth. It's interesting because it feels as though with your experience that you've just about touched the fourth. And I think, is that because, it's the fourth because you're drawing on your own experience of just entering that yourself through all of these near-death experiences or through your astral projection? Like, is the fourth most personal to you, I think, is what I'm asking.
Actually, yes, because I think I think at the end, the paintings and the works are always coming back to as you said, a personal experience, like an individuation of sorts. Like it's still from the kind of Maria self experience.
So is this, I guess, in essence, this could be a self-portrait of sorts too, in a sense.
I think there's like no escape to everything being a sort of self-portrait. Like as pure of a channel as we may try to be, we're always a mirror or a window, or and I also just have this kind of unstoppable tendency to put myself in all my works. So yeah.
How does it feel to see yourself reflected back, like in your art?
It feels fun. Like I think I have like a hidden, very shy actress inside of me. Like an unemployed actress. She loves to express through body gesture and word and presence and dance, and so I love using my own body to create an archetype in an image where there's more. I love doing that. Yeah,
I think that really shows through. Are you familiar with the artist Ana Mendieta?
Sí, claro, yes.
I was just wondering if you felt any relation to her practice in any way, or if there's something you picked up there that feels connected, because I'm seeing something.
What do you see? I mean, I've always adored her, but I haven't felt, I guess maybe I adore her so much that I cannot compare myself to her or something. Like
I think what's so interesting is like the body is we see the body, I suppose, in a lot of your works, and I suppose even if your body's not there, the spirit of it is. Like, for example, in this work, and I feel as though she utilizes the body to bring forth big lessons as well. So maybe that's my reading. It's like the body as your vessel in some way.
I like it. I take your reading.
Do you do a ceremony before you begin your works usually?
Yes, I do. Even though not always, it's not always the same shape. It changes depending on each work, but anything I begin and I finish has a ceremony. It didn't used to be so. It's more and more so now, like before I eat, after I eat, before I enter in a conversation or in a space. It's like this practice is taking over everything. And it's a way to make order to the pulse and the rhythms of life. And for my being, this is key to feeling connected, present, and in sacred relationship to everything, to everyday art or people or food. Yeah.
Right. And I was going to ask you, actually, what do you feel as though your ancestors want you to know? Like, is there something running through your line that you believe is like one of your strongest messages, or what is coming through?
Wow. Yeah, now I hadn't thought about this, but not in this particular way. But as you were asking it, what comes is community.
Right.
I was raised in community, and like my family live in community, and it's not the same in my mother's line because it's my father's ancestry, not my mom's. But but it's somehow just become such a key aspect to my life. The cohabitation with other people in a way that's not necessarily obvious in our culture.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I can't quite remember the name of this piece, but I did see one where there's a community and they're taking shape in your painting. Perhaps it's very pink. Maybe you could tell us the name of this one, and it's got like a big kind of circle in the center, and these people like layered on top of it.
Yes, I know which word.
Yeah.
Integration and balance. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of this. So the human architecture in that painting, which is the castells, that's a word from Catalonia, in Valencia, this area of Spain. So it's the Catalan language. The castells are castles of people, and I love that tradition. I've seen it happen live, and I was so impressed and so shocked, because these humans have immense, profound presence in their body, in their spirit, to be able to sustain one another in these towers. And they use this vision, they use this like super intelligent system of obviously stronger, like wider, shorter people on the bottom, and like getting to lighter body figures on the top, so they can, sustain this architecture, this kind of triangular architecture. And they put children. Sometimes children are the ones that like climb all the way up to the top and crown the structure. So it's like men, women, and children working together to create a stable shape. And they are they're like collaborating in this like super heightened state of consciousness. Is beautiful. And they are
sorry, go ahead, sorry.
Just to finish, like there's even a circle of people that are on the ground surrounding the base of the structure, and they're just doing like this with their hands, like shoulder to shoulder to shoulder to shoulder towards the center, almost like concentrating just focus, love, and energy to like then like bring up this vertical structure. So there's like so much wisdom coded in this tradition. It's incredible.
I was going to say, because I had another question that I was like, let me ask her this. But first of all, I would say it's interesting to see how like to me there's a message that if the collective work together, we can ascend, and only in working together do we have the spiritual facilities to do so in some way. Like together it's like but also my question in there, with the children being at the top, do you feel as though as a child we have a heightened sensitivity to the other portal or the other realm in some way? Can we walk through more unconsciously?
Absolutely. Like children are connected to the Vedic world. They are connected to the beings in nature. They freely talk to the beings in nature. It's only through the kind of entering of language and the conditioning of our human systems that they kind of forget, and we kind of forget, and we there's the choice to not forget anything, but we will have to make a full revolution in our societal systems to do that. But there are entire cultures that don't forget. They bring it all from childhood to adulthood.
Right. I think that's so interesting to me, because I think when you talk to people a lot about spirituality, they have more vivid memories as a kid. Like me, for example, I think spirit chooses to talk to you in some ways when you surrender all skepticism, or when skepticism doesn't exist in you, if you know what I mean. And I think kids are kind of devoid, like they have no skepticism until, like you say, it's placed on them, or they're taught to be skeptical. So in some cases you hear people being incredibly intuitive as a child, and then for a great period of their teenage or adulthood they lose sight of that. And was there ever a time where you felt that you lost sight of your connection to source and you had to bring yourself back in?
Like every day. And sometimes I mean there have been darker periods and lighter periods in my life. As a teenager, I was both very connected to like darker realms and very subconscious realms, and but also with so much fear, so a lot of interference in the identity. Childhood is definitely a very clear portal in my memory, but completely disorganized. Like there was no understanding of anything. There was just this like oh my god, like just no words, no understanding, and no one around me able to contain, explain, or hold experiences that for me were very normal. And now I can try to to frame what they may have been, but it's impossible to know because they were experienced from a child. Yeah, but no, I mean, the reason why I also have a regular practice is to keep the connection as clear and regular as I can, because humanly it's just sometimes reality becomes kind of gluey.
Gluey, I get that. It's really interesting. And I think I'm interested to ask you, how would you go about telling somebody or directing somebody to open themselves up to portals, if you could give a piece of advice?
To open their own portals?
Or initiation perhaps.
Coming from my own experience, I think we need space and silence to sense the finer realities. So the first thing someone needs to do is to be able to close their eyes, stay still, and hear, or even just walk and listen deep in nature. So the inviting anything to speak to you in a way that's not words and language, whether it's a tree or the presence of another person or your own inner perception, but that it takes a certain refinement and like an exquisite state of being. It cannot be done with mental noise. Like there is this quiet and silent state that needs to be present, because the inner hearing is it's a fine technology, and from there you already have the portal for anything, whether it's for your voice or someone else's voice, and it's listening is the most important thing.
And I think it was interesting there when you talked about the trees and everything. I noticed there was a segment where you talk about your connection to rocks. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what that gave to you.
It just makes me so happy to think about rocks in general. I don't have an explanation. It just happens that I'm very drawn to rocks and to specific minerals, depending the moment of life and the territory. Like when I'm walking in nature, I feel like everything is speaking, and it's so beautiful, and all the voices are beautiful and harmonic, but the voices of the rocks are the ones that take me the most, like even more so than plants and animals. And like there's rocks all around here, and like they're always in my altars, and minerals. Minerals are fascinating. They're the bones of our earth, and they contain this deep time information, like geological time information, codes of life and transmutation, and the birth of matter from a perspective that's so beyond human, so beyond human life, is so elegant, and kind of the tempo of it almost makes me forget all this like complexity of human existence. It's like in the presence of a rock, it's just like I'm at awe of the physics of earth and life. They're so relaxed, like.
No, I know what you mean. It's given me so many thoughts, because I know that I forget what they were called, but I do know in ancient Greece there was said to be this oracle who would give you this knowledge from behind a rock. Like, you would come to this rock and the rock would be between the person and the other person, like the oracle and the recipient. So there was conversation happening through the rocks there, and it's almost like that kind of, you would be obsessed with this. I have to find out who exactly it was.
Please, I need this reference.
I'm so gonna send it to you. But it's interesting. It's like conversations through a rock, and it's supposed like the oracle felt like they had to be behind this great piece of, I would say, knowledge and wisdom. Rocks have been around since like the beginning of time, hey, and I suppose, I'm not a scientist or anything, but some of them just cease to crack or cease to go, like for hundreds of thousands of years, right? They carry like the history, like the blueprint of the world. And if you look at them, like for example, me, I always see faces in rocks. Like I see something very human in them. And I was speaking to the other day, you might know her, Cherry Lazar. She was talking a lot about how before monkeys, before different animals, we were descended from shrubs. And I wonder before that if we were descended from rocks, or maybe the rocks even span further back to our source, because they do look very human, no, to me anyway.
Yeah, I think the way I sense it is that we are part of the same bigger being. We are part of the same ecosystem, life system. So we're brothers and sisters. We're related. They're one kingdom, we're another kingdom. We're brothers and sisters. We're made of the same matter, and their presence, we can connect them to our bone structure. They receive, they contain information, and they receive information and bring it to places so they can be used to plant with the moons. Like you can whisper to a rock and like put that frequency inside the earth or inside a body of water, and you will be materially affecting the vibration of that place and elevating the frequency. If you do it correctly, you can be like changing the reality and elevating the frequency. So there is an alliance that's very clear to me in the coexistence between all the kingdoms of earth.
And it's interesting that you say that. I do believe it's been proven in some cases. Perhaps they were like scientists and they spoke into the water, like they spoke like really unkind words into the water, and then they spoke really kind words into the water as well, and the molecular structure of the water had actually changed on the basis of those words. So that is literally, it just shows how much like gravitas, like how much weight our words do have on the world and the vibration they really carry, right?
Absolutely.
Having said that, do we make offerings to objects such as, or beings such as the rocks, as we would ancestors? Is that a part of your practice in some way?
Whether I do offerings?
Yeah.
Yes, I do offerings sometimes. I do regular offerings with the moon, with the new moon and the full moon.
Right.
Also when I'm menstruating, and sometimes not following a regular rhythm, but sometimes if it like kind of sprouts from my being and needs to be done outside this calendar, I also do offerings. Yeah, there is that's, as I was also saying before with the rituals, that's becoming more and more present in my life, more orderly now than it was before.
That's really interesting to me. I think you touched on the moon centers, or moon cycles rather. I believe within Kundalini yoga they have 11 within the feminine body. I don't know if you follow this practice, but I suppose it does sound as though you're very connected to kind of the moon in terms of your femininity in some way. So having said that, is there a particular cycle that you usually find provokes some kind of art in you, or like draws some kind of creativity out of you specifically?
Yeah, definitely. There's something about ovulation, the like the time right during ovulation makes me very like kind of outward going, and
Yeah.
like a very exterior and manifesting, kind of wanting to bring from inside towards the outside, and also very sexual energy, like it's just like like sweating sexuality. And and the blood time, the bleeding time, even though it's more like a cocoon or a cave time, moves a lot of creative energy, because the things are so clear, like
Right.
anything that's mysterious and unreachable in other times, if I bring it up as a question during that time, it's like straight on, like what, like the certainty of an answer comes, or like a way to explore it comes, like there's this access to a type of wisdom. So if I open a creative space within that time, it happens very certain, very solid, like yeah, like deeply rooted, so to say.
It's
I am familiar with those centers and cycles, and are part of the blood series as well. Like that was a part of the the drawing of the blood series.
Would you ever do perhaps a performance or a ritual during menstruation, or incorporating the blood perhaps in your practice?
Yes, as an offering and a return to earth.
Right.
And I am still, to be honest, like I'm in this moment in my life, I'm very open to the womb, to like listening to the womb
Yeah.
in a different way, and to my blood in a different way, more kind of more intimate, with more care.
Right.
and and uh, and it feels quite new
Right.
how it is now. I'm still like, oh, I feel like I got into like a new class in school, like let's see what this is bringing.
No, I get that. It's I think it's interesting. I don't know about you, but I think when you speak to the womb, you sometimes hear some uncomfortable truths, or some things that you need to release as a feminine. So we open ourselves up to all the messages, not just the supportive, sweet ones.
Yeah, there is a lot of trauma that, I mean, if there is trauma, the place to find it will
It's
be
the
there
womb. Yeah.
as a woman. And it's not just our trauma, it's collective,
Collective,
the
yes.
feminine. And the more you open to it, they will find. It's not like you like clear it, it's like it's done. It's like if you open to it, you, through that portal, you can keep healing for for the rest, for the team.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I think it's liberating. And I think what I wanted to touch on is, what do you perceive to be divine feminine, if you're going to use that term, or like sacred feminine? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I like this question, because the idea of the divine feminine, sacred feminine, has been portrayed in such kind of cheesy,
Yeah.
like divine feminine, to me, like if I connect to that field, is a it's the pure feminine energy, like feminine source energy, in terms of what forms reality and the laws of nature, that primal feel. And it's not easy to bring to human language what that is, because in this
Right.
experience of life, it's all entangled together, like we're a mix of so many colors and energies, and we obviously are, you know, within the field of feminine, masculine, and neutrality.
Yeah.
Like there's such a mix, but
Polarity, yeah.
divine divine feminine, and to somehow bring it to this plane and work with that energy, I feel like we we first need to open that connection to the mother source,
Yeah.
and which is actually it's a consciousness. You can call it like an entity or a being.
Yeah.
It's a field of consciousness, and it has qualities to it, and its qualities have nothing to do with white fluffy dresses. Like white fluffy dresses may be a consequence of connecting to the feminine, for sure, but its form is not necessarily honored by the aesthetics of the divine feminine today in social media and so on. I miss very, very often, I miss the quality of like rigor, like the ability to put limits and be very rigorous, very disciplined, very like focused, and have like super powerful boundaries, which is a quality of the feminine, not just holding, sustaining, loving unconditionally, and all motherly soft qualities that are very easily, and beauty and sensuality, these are like easily seen outside. But that other one, which is kind of like here yes, here no, I miss that sometimes. Also like birth and death, like come on, like it's basics 101 divine feminine, and like it's not pretty. Birth and death is not pretty, it's not fluffy, it's like powerful, destructive, like life altering.
Massively. I was going to say that because I agree with you. I find it very uncomfortable when the divine feminine is yielding and passive and she just receives. Like, what if you identify as feminine, but you don't want to sit and wait and receive? There's a lot more kind of back and forth, and I think negotiating how we want to live our lives that comes with being feminine too. Like a little bit more of an active approach in some way is what I resonate with. So having said that, do you take your kind of perception of the feminine from your ancestors directly and how they would perceive the feminine, or is it of your own understanding?
Within the chain of the lineage, and as through generations we evolve and update beliefs and the ways we do things. In my case, what I took from my mother and my feminine lineage took me up until a point of my embodiment as a woman. I was actually lacking a lot of support from like through my conditioning and growing up the way I was raised. I was missing a lot of support to fully and honorably inhabit my feminine. And it was more kind of meeting other women and like softening myself to the mysterious darkness and beauty of the feminine in the mirror with like sisters, friends, and that I finally, and I had to leave my home and to be fully fed with a rainbow of the feminine experience. And then from there I will begin to be like, oh yeah, that resonates, like I might try that in, like how will I feel? Because I was so disconnected from my body for so long, like I didn't really get like a way to love myself from my mother, to accept this body. It took me ages to accept my body. Like I'm still like sometimes like, what the fuck is this? Like some days I'm like, I'm not sure I want it. And that's deeply feminine, like to accept our mother, like our vehicle, you know, that like at the basis of femininity. So still working on it.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think that's interesting because my next question was going to be like, are we all mothers inherently as women, even though we don't necessarily birth a child? Are we still able to be mothers, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, the mother archetype exists within a woman. Whether it's through biological birth or bearing children or has nothing to do with children. Again, it's a field of consciousness with qualities, and it can be manifested and explored in so many different ways that are, it's about nourishment and holding and giving and channeling and growing and manifesting and receiving. It's not
No, that's a really good response. But one more thing I was very interested in while we're looking at this is what do you feel about the use of pastel colors, like soft chalky colors? How do they feel to you?
Well, they obviously feel attractive because they keep coming out in my work. There's something about softness that these colors are, they're soft to me. Like they communicate gently. They don't need to scream to give information, and they can exist within other colors quite harmoniously, and in a low key, like the contrast is there, but it's not very extreme. So it's more to they're like friendly for sensitive people, for people that are highly perceptive and tuned in. And I think that's the way I perceive, and therefore the way I also express.
And to that, I want to say, is there a color or are there some hues that you find highly provocative or triggering in some way to you to work with, that you maybe avoid or you choose not to integrate?
Yeah, I had a thing with yellow for the longest time. I didn't know what to do with yellow, and green. Like they were like, so the frequency they hold for a very long time, I was just like, oh my god, I don't know how to handle this in a way that I'm comfortable. And then a few years ago, kind of the sun, like I started connecting to the sun and to nature and like parts of my being, and there was like more green present, more, and now it's like everywhere, and yellow is everywhere. Before that, like pinks, blue, earthy tones, and black and white were like easy, but those two, yellow and green, have been a sort of school.
That's very interesting, because I think with the green being very very tied to like that heart chakra energy, it sounds to me as though perhaps when you had more of like a heart awakening with your mother, maybe that made you more able to integrate these frequencies and these things with ease.
Maybe. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Little observation. But I wanted to just ask you now, if you were going to design a portal for everyone or anyone to enter, how would yours feel and look to you?
Ooh, the word that comes is multidimensional. I will, if I did it on this, like if I could design a portal, which I can, and I do.
You do, yeah.
But like especially now with a project that is opening with a friend, where we are anchoring temples and portals, literally. We just haven't made it public yet, but we're literally doing that as a project. The way I see it is to make a space where there's not only on these dimension objects and shapes and smells or sounds or, let's say, stimulation that take you consciousness where you open, but that actually everything that's happening here is already an anchoring and a connection to other realms. So there's a resonance between the planes, and which is why I said multidimensional. Like I wouldn't just draw a door on a wall and that's pretty and kind of it's the symbol of coming through from one place to another, but there will need to be a meaning and a connection on that image or presence to something else, where you have the permission to go, and that can be held and sustained so people can kind of truly play. And that's, I mean, if that's done with good intention and orderly and properly, I feel people can go into places and have very profound experiences. And that's what sacred spaces are when they're designed by humans. They're portals. They're being carried by other beings too. You know, you don't do it on your own. You might be doing it, but you have, you know, you need the permission of the beings that are present and that you're calling upon. And yeah.
So that's really stunning to think about. Is there something you would want to have at the gate or at the door? Like, what is the first thing that you'd like them to kind of experience as they walk through?
I think the first thing should be a sort of like a clearance, perhaps a sound, like something that really softens you and brings you into presence and like places you in the right state of awareness to enter from like a pure heart and an open state of being. So I think sound is the most effective, beautiful way to do that. Yeah.
Right. I was going to ask you on that. What type of sound resonates the most with you or opens you up the most to spirit? Because I noticed you mentioned a collaboration with your friend. I don't want to get their name wrong, so you can let me know. And perhaps that is helping you with your connection in some way.
Yes, like the friend I collaborate with often, her name is Eva Geis, and she's a wonderful composer and synthesis, and like also like a friend in spirit. And sound is such a mysterious and powerful medicine. It's not just an art form. It's it affects reality very, very, very directly as medicine. And it to me, sound is one of the easiest way to change my state of consciousness. So if I want to go to an emotion, or if I want to feel happier, or if I want to connect to my body and move, or if I want to like calm down, sound makes it like this, like no effort I have to think about it. It's just like straight away, boom, that's it. Whether it's I'm listening to it and play a tune, or chanting and making sound, and like vibrating it in different parts of the body and letting that happen. That's becoming more and more common. Like even when I do my yoga practice, like I breathe with sound. It's quite annoying for people around me, but
oh no, I like it. I quite like that. But that is beautiful. So before we draw in, is there something else you'd like to share with us, or something that people should know about your practice?
Nothing really comes up. I'm so satisfied with everything you've asked. I'm like, really, really feel like you looked at the work from such a curious and profound place. I'm very grateful that you gave it that beautiful
attention. I'm grateful. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.